With a 10-1 record in one-score games the past two seasons, has Missouri been lucky or good? Well, I'll just tell you this. Bill Parcells and his famous quote was a lot more close to accurate than it was wrong.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso, and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. And for all the talk of Ahmad Hardy this offseason, I started to wonder, who is going to be Missouri's second leading rusher this season? Also, speaking of rankings, well, where does Sophie Cunningham rank just in terms of notoriety among everyone in the NBA at this point? The WNBA, of course, I should say there. So I want to get to all those topics later in the program. I want to start off today, though, obviously with what I teased at the top of the program. Missouri, lucky or good the past couple of seasons? Well, I have to say I get tired of the cliche, why can't it be both? But in this case, it's probably pretty appropriate. But I will say what's most appropriate. Bill Parcells famously said, "You are what your record says you are." And if one takes that statement maybe a little bit too literally, you could nitpick it and say that circumstances, injury luck, all kinds of stuff, which especially stat-minded type of people will do, will nitpick that statement a little bit. And especially if you're just if you're just going pure rings culture in terms of who gets into the Hall of Fame or not. Like, for example, I saw somebody arguing today that Jared Allen, the former Kansas City Chief and Minnesota Viking edge rusher who never won a Super Bowl, that should have somehow been a knock against him. I think that is a silly idea. But I will say this. When it comes to perception, especially among the young athletes out there that you're trying to recruit, you are what your record says you are is far closer to reality in those kids' minds, by the way, than whatever Missouri's Pythagorean win expectation was for the last couple of seasons. What its record should have been, as the data people might say, versus what it actually was. Well, I'll just tell you this. Again, back to the idea of lucky or good. The truth is, Missouri has quite obviously had some fortunate or lucky moments, if you want to call them that, over the past couple of seasons. In 2022, it was quite the opposite, where Missouri had a bunch of horrible breaks go against it, to the point where I started questioning if I should continue doing this podcast at all. So thank you to 2023 for getting me back on the wagon. But the reality is, again, you go back, you watch the Vanderbilt game last year. You go back, you watch the Auburn game last season. Heck, obviously, you go back to the 4th and 17 against Florida. There are several single plays there that if they go against Missouri, well, it's hard to imagine, especially knowing how the game played out as you do when you go back and watch them. It's just hard to imagine Missouri would have won those games. So, yes, some fortunate, a drop by a player, a missed field goal, that type of thing. But it's back to perception once again, because as time moves along here, people are going to forget all of these little details. And in fact, when I just brought up, hey, maybe a dropped pass by Auburn and that famous comeback by Brady Cook and the Tigers in homecoming, I'm sure a lot of you probably have no idea what play I'm talking about. I had to go back and watch it again myself to be reminded of that. And the only reason I'm bringing it up is not for that play specifically. Again, it's about perception, and in this case, that is a positive thing for Missouri. Coming off 2022, Missouri goes 6-6 in the regular season. I thought, you know what? That was a better team than a 6-6 team. Back to the stat heads and that perception of, well, you know what? it's not so much important that I thought Missouri should have won more games in 2022. It just made me more confident in the Tigers with a lot of those same players coming back in 2023. So go back and let's look at those one-score games a little bit more closely, by the way, because I brought up the games where Missouri was truly fortunate. Well, also when you throw one-score games, hey, they're not all created equally, and it can be a bit of an arbitrary cutoff at a certain point. For example, in the 2023 LSU game at home, Missouri indeed trailed by one possession with the football deep in its own territory. You may remember that Brady Cook forced a ball in there that was intercepted and returned into the end zone by LSU to make that a two-possession ball game that was sort of ultimately a meaningless play. Obviously, you never want to throw a pick six, but Brady Cook, a guy who was obviously very careful with the ball at times, hey, when you're trailing, this is your last possession, sometimes you just got to let it go. The point here is that, well, that isn't what cost Missouri the football game. If they had just simply turned the ball over on downs and lost by one possession instead of two there, really the result is exactly the same. So the point here is that the edge between 10-1 and 10-2 was pretty close. It's still a loss for Missouri. Again, just a bit of an arbitrary cutoff there. I'd also point out, to me, last season, Missouri's 6-point victory over Boston College never totally felt like Missouri was going to lose that game. Yes, closer than we wanted for sure, but a couple of big plays broken by Boston College in the passing game. But to me, Missouri had the ball there to close out the game. They ran out the clock under maybe a normal circumstance, a normal possession. They might have punched that ball into the end zone. Almost certainly would have gotten a field goal. So again, getting over that somewhat arbitrary threshold, And something I pointed out yesterday as well, the 23-19 victory over Middle Tennessee in week 2 that had almost everybody thinking the Tigers were going to lose to Kansas State in week 3. Well, again, that was another game that I was highly, highly frustrated, probably as frustrated as I've ever been after a Missouri football game, at least on this program, with the expectations I had. Well, again, that's just a reminder not to freak out because, of course, Missouri did beat Kansas State in week 3. They did beat Memphis in week 4. They did go on to go 11-2, win the Cotton Bowl and all that good stuff. So the point here is, let's not freak out, especially early in the season, especially in a world where we no longer have 2-a-day practices. The contact has gone down. If anything, September football can be a wee bit unpredictable, maybe a more unpredictable than it's ever been, at least in my humble opinion. So if early in the season things aren't working perfectly for Missouri, just a reminder that, well, teams in October and November can look a heck of a lot different sometimes than those teams, especially in very early September football. And, of course, all indications are that Ahmad Hardy, the new Missouri running back, well, he's the safe bet to lead the Tigers in rushing this season. But it got me thinking, who might be the second leading rusher on the Tigers this season? I'd love to hear from all of you on your feedback. Also, could that person be Bo Prabula as the second leading rusher on the Tigers? Let's talk about that coming up. But I'll tell you this, have you ever wished managing your money felt easier? Well, with Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch Money puts you in the driver's seat. And if you're like me, if you've got a side hustle, you don't just have one job, you've got several different ways of making money. That's pretty common these days, especially among people in my generation. Well, Monarch Money is exactly the type of budgeting app and a complete financial center you need that's going to keep all of this in focus. It's going to give you a much clearer picture of your complete financial goals, desires, and exactly where you stand, most importantly of all. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. As of today, it looks like Jamal Roberts is likely to be second on the Missouri depth chart if Missouri indeed ever puts out an official or an honest depth chart for that matter. I think Jamal Roberts would probably be listed second behind Ahmad Hardy. But I have to say, he is, I think, more of a third down type of running back, or at least that is how Missouri is going to be utilizing him. I think he'll still get carries, certainly, but I think it is questionable if he'll get enough carries to actually be Missouri's second leading rusher. In fact, it could be somebody like Marquise Davis or even Tavoris Jones, who's much more of a veteran presence, a highly ballyhooed high school recruit out of the state of Texas a few seasons ago. Was Jones, but Marquise Davis is basically a new version of Tavoris Jones. He's the new shiny object as a true freshman, the new shiny toy, if you will, for Drinkwitz and his staff to play with. So I think a lot of fans and reporters are more drawn toward him. I'll just say, I think if I were taking the odds, if you were putting odds out there, if Bo Prabula was anywhere third or fourth on the list, I think I would actually take him. I think you're going to see Missouri and Prabula run the ball with the quarterback quite a bit, not only to gain an extra man in the box for all intents and purposes, but also to help out Hardy as well. The more of a threat the quarterback is to keep the ball on the backside, well, that essentially takes another defender, often an unblocked defender, on the backside of the defense out of the play. So Hardy, I think, obviously the level of competition of the defense that he's facing is going to be a big step up, but I don't think that's going to be a huge problem for him. Here's a guy who has NFL type of talent, in my opinion. You know, a little bit early to be talking about a guy who just played one season, I suppose, of college football going to the NFL, but it's pretty clear to me he has that type of potential. And the deal with Hardy is, I think he fits this Missouri outside zone running scheme like an absolute glove. You saw it last year at Louisiana. So I think he's basically the perfect type of running back for this Missouri system and has a chance, again, with the teammates that he has around him. Yes, the defenders in the SEC are going to be a step up, but counterintuitively, I think it might be easier for Hardy this season simply because his teammates will be better matched, I think, with the opposition. Again, Louisiana Monroe, I should say. That is an important distinction. Louisiana, actually, Missouri's opponent this season is a decent ball club. I think Missouri will probably be about a 2-touchdown favorite, but it's not going to be 35 like it might be against UMass. Don't mistake that. But Louisiana Monroe, a much different story. They're kind of a traditional doormat in FCS football, in FBS football. Division I football, whatever you want to call it, it's definitely FBS. I misspoke the first time there. The point there is that actually I think his teammates at Missouri, especially on the offensive line, at quarterback, the receivers too, everything around him, the coaching staff, I think that's actually a much better matchup with the rest of the SEC than it is, say, Louisiana Monroe playing against their schedule. If anything, I think Hardy had to do more with less last season than he will with Missouri. And I got to say, I was waiting around a little bit today, hoping to get some information, at least maybe Eli Drinkwitz talking to us about the scrimmage at all. So far, we haven't gotten there. Maybe we'll get there a little bit later today. But I have to say, once again, the contrast between college and the NFL, just in terms of access, could not be more stark this time of year during these preseason training camps. Well, basically the NFL lets you watch everything. Whereas in college football, you get to watch basically nothing. You get to watch, if you're in the media, by the way, you'll get to see some stretching, maybe some centers snap the ball to the quarterback. You get to see him throw a few passes to uncovered receivers, that type of thing. But what you don't get anymore is anything that resembles, well, an offense going against a defense, that type of thing. You know, anything that actually looks like a real football snap. Kind of odd to me. Again, there was a scrimmage yesterday, one on Saturday. How much information we get, I really don't know. But this trend of, well, we're not even going to allow reporters to see the scrimmage doesn't seem to be ending anytime soon. Seems unfortunate to me. I would think that if the NFL could get by literally letting fans into training camp, why can't college football? That's just a mystery to me. But on the more positive thought side, according to Natalie Jones over at ABC 17, and others reported this, of course, but Tiger football has sold out of season tickets for the 2025 season. It's the second straight year that has happened for the program, of course, off the success of the 2023 season. Missouri cashes in. So again, more to my point of you are what your record says you are, as Bill Parcells said. Again, nitpick that statement all you want. When it comes to the masses, when it comes to the people you're trying to recruit, that's a pretty darn true statement. I think that is pretty good evidence of that as well. And of course, well, I suppose one could question, hey, wait a second, how many season tickets is Missouri actually selling this year because of the construction in the north end zone? I'll be honest, I don't know how many season tickets are actually sold, general admission for the Hill, for example. So I would assume it has some impact on those numbers, but I wouldn't think it's gigantic. Regardless, this is a very positive sign, obviously, for just the interest surrounding the program. And our buddy Sophie Cunningham has gone from the mayor of Columbia to, in my opinion, easily one of the 10 most recognizable people in the WNBA, maybe even more, maybe she's even higher up the list than that. So let's break it down and explain exactly how this all happened here coming up in just a little bit, and some bummer injury news on the NFL side for a couple of former Tigers. I'll talk about that in just a second, but it's time to fuel up and turn it up with 5-Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor of your favorite golf drink, minus the alcohol, of course, into a quick, energizing shot. And let's be honest, some days on the course, or off of it for that matter, you just need that extra boost to stay sharp and energized. And you know what? The other day, I felt like a baller when I managed to break 40 on a side, believe it or not, over at Eagle Knoll Golf Club. A beautiful Sunday afternoon, capped off and really started, I would say, with a 5-Hour Energy Transfusion. That was exactly what I needed to power through my round. And golf is all about good times with good people and good flavors. Of course, the grape, ginger, lime flavor gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without chasing down the Bev card. If you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that is the number 5 energy. That is the number 5hourenergy.com. You can use my promo code LOCKEDONGOLF to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Whether you're meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion-flavored 5-Hour Energy shots today. Again, that is the number 5hourenergy.com. So stand-up comedian Whitney Cummings, who has well over 1 million followers on X and probably on Instagram, other places as well. She's a very well-known, famous person in her industry. Well, she put a video out of herself shooting some hoops recently and said, "My dream was to play basketball for a living. Tomorrow night, I get to see at Caitlin Clark 22, of course, tagging Caitlin Clark's handle, but also tagging Sophie Cunningham's handle as well. She says, I get to see Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham in LA at the Sparks Fever game, and I would like them to know kiddos still kind of got it. So bragging about her basketball game there. But one thing I noticed there is Whitney Cummings, again, a pretty famous person in her own right. I think a lot of people actually will make more people will know who Sophie Cunningham is. I shouldn't say more. There's going to be a significant chunk of that audience who is more familiar with Sophie Cunningham. That is not something I would have said probably a couple of months ago. But because of Caitlin Clark and her massive stardom, well, and the idea that I think there was a lot of people who felt like the rest of the league was picking on Caitlin a little bit, when Sophie Cunningham stood up for Caitlin, threw that girl to the ground, kind of got in her face, all that good stuff, well, that went viral big time. And ever since then, well, the nation, for all intents and purposes, the world maybe to a lesser extent, has started to pick up what I think a lot of Missouri fans have picked up about Sophie Cunningham and why she's so popular. But most importantly, I think when you start to look around the league, other than Caitlin Clark and other than Angel Reese, is there anybody out there who is without a doubt 100% more recognizable to the masses? I'm not just talking about basketball fans. I'm saying the masses in general, because obviously Caitlin Clark is a massive star. Angel Reese is just behind her, I would say. But really, I'll start listing some big-time WNBA faces and I'll say tie goes to the non-Cunningham. Okay, we'll say if it's close, we'll give it to the other person. I think Kelsey Plum is a big-time name and face in the WNBA. Paige Buchers, Breanna Stewart, certainly Brittany Griner is a very well-known person among the masses. Sabrina Ionescu. Maybe Skylar Diggins. See, now we're starting to stretch it here a little bit. Again, would my mom know who Skylar Diggins is? Would she know who Sabrina Ionescu is? Well, maybe my mom isn't the best example, but just one's mom. And I say my mom may not be the best example because she already knew who Sophie Cunningham was. Really, any Missouri fan is not going to be the best example here. The point here is just the masses. Whoever it is who's not a particularly big WNBA fan, well, they still know who Caitlin Clark is. They still know who Angel Reese is. I'm not sure they know who Breanna Stewart is. And that's not an insult. That's not to say that Sophie's a better basketball player. That's not the point. And certainly Asia Wilson and Tina Charles, Kelsey Mitchell, by the way, one of their Indiana Fever teammates, is a really, really good player in her own right, and one of the reasons why Indiana's hanging in there, even without Caitlin Clark being in action right now. So none of this isn't supposed to be an insult to anybody. It's just more of a, wow, what a recognition of Sophie Cunningham and her suddenly massive star power, which, I don't know, I'm kind of thinking she's going to parlay into a pretty good broadcasting career here in sports after she's done playing basketball, I think, at the very least. But who knows where her career is going to end up going. I think the possibilities are pretty endless and exciting for that young lady at the moment. I'm definitely happy for her and everything that comes with it. So with all that being said, hopefully you've been happy with this program here today. Hopefully we'll get some more information on these practices. Maybe I'll have to start pounding the pavement and maybe, I don't know, getting some enhanced interrogation techniques on some people around the program. I'm fiending for some real information about actual football here, and I know you are as well. But hey, thanks for listening to Locked On Mizzou today and making this show your first listen every day. And for your second listen, check out the portal with the Scoutmaster, Brian Smith. You got to be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape, so do it by finding the portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So until next time, I'm John Miller. This has been Locked On Mizzou.